They used to say the clock on the wall says it's time to start. We don't do that here. We say the picture on the wall says it's time to start. We want to say welcome to everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We also say welcome to those who are watching us on Facebook and on YouTube. Hopefully you picked up a lesson outline as you came in this morning. If you did not, they're still available back on those back two podiums. Now, before we get into our class, let me remind you of our online Bible classes. Bible investigation, Monday through Friday. What is it? It's simply your questions and Bible answers. That's what it's all about. So please tune in to Bible investigation. And we've had some wonderful questions, and I've tried my best to give you those Bible answers to those questions. Also, I want to remind you of Fundamentals of the Faith. We are now doing this week our review of chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Romans. There is a study guide with questions, okay? And these study guides are available on the table back by what I call the fake palm tree, okay? So go back there to the fake palm tree and you can get a copy of those questions there. Also, I want to remind you of 2 Minutes to a Better Marriage. When that class started, it started on Valentine's Day. The intent was to run with 100 marital tips. Those 100 marital tips will actually cover 100 days, not 100 marital tips, but it would cover 100 days. Those 100 days are almost up. I need your feedback. Should we continue or not? If we do not continue, it will come back every Valentine's Day, every year. So if you want it to continue, let me know, and we can take care of that. Also, I want to remind you of Christianity 101. This is the class that's not for you. It's for your 5. It's for your 5. Please encourage. Billy's doing an awesome job with this class, an awesome job. Please encourage your 5 to watch Christianity 101. Now, before we get into our lesson, let's look at our family memory passage. Leviticus 1, verse 13, "But he shall wash the entrails and the legs with water. Then the priest shall bring it all and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord." God has always wanted his children to sacrifice to him. To sacrifice to him. We as Christians today, we have a unique opportunity. We can present our bodies as a living sacrifice, as Paul wrote to the church at Rome. We can present our bodies as a living sacrifice to him. That's the best sacrifice, when we give ourselves to the Lord. Now, if you want to understand God, understand Genesis. I really believe that. Because Genesis is our first introduction to God's grace, God's love, God's mercy, God's judgment, God's law. Wonderful book. Now, let's review. But guess what? We don't need to do this because that's exactly what we're doing. We've got our review questions over chapter 26. So we're in lesson number 143. We're down to question number 6, or number 7, question number 7. I'm going to ask Scott to stand up, and he's going to respond to question 7. But then I want you to respond. I want you to think about your thoughts on this question, okay? Here's our question, and I'll read the question. What was the ultimate blessing? Remember, we talked about the many blessings that God gave to Isaac? What was the ultimate blessing provided by God to Isaac, and why? Okay, Scott, God gave him so much. Just like today, God gives us so much. In your opinion, what was the ultimate blessing? And you got your mic there.
The ultimate blessing was the one that was given to Abraham, his father. Verse number 4, in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed.
Okay.
His seed would be the Savior of
So
people.
that's what you think was the ultimate blessing, okay? Now, as we said, and thank you there, Scott, we'll have you sit down, we'll have you stand up on question 8. God gave him so much. To you, what was the ultimate blessing that God gave Isaac? He gave him so much. He gave him protection. He gave him his family, Rebekah, Jacob and Esau. He gave him, what would I say, a heritage? A heritage. What do you think was the ultimate blessing? Oh, Cindy has been reading my notes. Out of all the blessings that God gave Isaac, and Scott, you're right, big blessing. Now, and all those blessings are big blessings. Just to have God with him always. To know that you are God's chosen person. Wow, what a blessing. So yes, Scott, big blessing, but yes, Cindy, I'm with you too. That's a big blessing. Amen. Look at question 8. Scott, if you don't mind, stand up. What do we learn from God blessing Isaac? What do we learn from the fact that God blessed Isaac? Go ahead, Scott.
God keeps his promises.
What?
God keeps his promises.
Ooh, God keeps his promise. Even if mankind is not the best. You know, if the Bible, Luke, if the Bible was full of people who were perfect, I would be so discouraged because I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. Ask Lisa. She can give you a laundry list. God gives us the characters of the Bible with their freckles, with their warts, with their blemishes, with everything. God keeps his promise. Even if he's not exactly the man that he really should be, God keeps his promise. I need to know that. Because if it was left up to me to merit heaven, Pam, if it was left up to me to merit heaven, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to merit heaven. I'm not. But it's God's grace that's been extended to me through my obedience to him that he will keep his promise. He will keep his promise. Now, we're getting ready to go now to John here. John's going to lead us on question 9. Why, and this is the easy one, comes straight from the Bible. Why did Isaac call the name of the first well Esek?
Because his herdsmen had quarreled with the Philistine herdsmen.
Yeah. Easy answer, you know. He called it based on what was happening. You know, that was a common thing that the Jewish people would do. When God's people were traveling in the wilderness, they did the same thing. You know, they called the names of places based on what was happening there. But now keep in mind, Isaac is God's man. Isaac is God's man. Why would God allow this to happen? You know, he's went to the trouble of digging the well. He's went to the trouble of trying to maintain this well, and he loses this well. Got a big quarrel, got a big dispute. Why would God let that happen? when you became a Christian, did all your problems go away? Jim, when you became a Christian, did every one of your problems just disappear? No. No. That's not what Christianity is all about. It's not about what we get. Okay, I'm going to be a Christian because all the stuff I get. I want this, 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 this. I want to be a Christian because I love God. I want to be a Christian because I love the Lord. And yes, life can throw you a curveball, if I can borrow a baseball analogy. But even though life throws you a curveball, we've got God on our side. Now, John, look at question number 10. Question number 10. What did Isaac call the second well? And where does this name come from? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to spell this. Rehoboth. Rehoboth?
Yeah.
However you say that. And I don't know if I can tell you where it came from, but I can tell you why it came. And it came because the Lord had made room or space for them there.
Isaac could have been disappointed. He could have been discouraged. I need these wells and I'm having these problems with the local people. But what was God doing? Remember, God wants him back in Beersheba. He is gently pushing him toward Beersheba. To isolate Isaac, because Isaac needs that isolation from the world. Now, question number 11. Ed, get ready. What Abraham-like activity did Isaac do after God had appeared to him? Now, this is actually the second appearance of God to Isaac. What thing did he do?
He built an altar and called upon the name of the Lord.
Ooh. This is Isaac at his best. Now, later on, I'm going to be disappointed in Isaac. I'm going to be very disappointed in Isaac. But right here, this is Isaac at his very best. He does what his father had done. He had seen, no doubt, his father do this. He built an altar and called upon the name of the Lord. Where can we worship God today? Ed, where can we worship God today? Everywhere. We can worship God everywhere. How many of you have ever attended a tent meeting? I see some hands going up. You worship in a tent. Hey, I have worshiped in a tent. I've worshiped in a building. I have worshiped in my home. I have worshiped out in God's created world with the birds and the trees all around me. We can worship anywhere and everywhere. Sunday is special. We talked about that last week. Sunday is special. We remember the greatest gift, Jesus on the cross. That memorial is what draws us to Sunday and reminds us of what the Lord did for us. But beyond the Lord's Supper, we can worship God anywhere and everywhere, any day. Any day. Now, next question. Ed, get ready. Oh, this is going to be a little bit of a tough one here. How can you use this lesson, Genesis 26, to grow spiritually and help others come to know and obey Jesus? That's a big one now, Ed. So go ahead, stand up here. Think about it, and then give us your answer.
Like Isaac, all of us are blessed in many different ways, and when we are blessed, we need to show that we appreciate that, not by building an altar like they did then, but by worshiping properly and not do like Cain and Abel. One worshiped properly, one did not worship properly. And we can point that out to others as we come in contact with them and help them obey and worship properly.
Ooh, repeat that last part again. I think that was the big one right there I like. Repeat that last part.
We can help them obey the gospel and worship properly.
Yeah. You know, isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing? Uh-oh, I've just lost my, I dropped that. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm sorry, I dropped it. Isn't it amazing of how we can take every verse of the Bible and it will help us live closer to Him, and we can use every verse in the Bible to help other people come to know Him. That's the beauty of the Bible. The beauty of the Bible. Now, you see two more questions. Questions 13 and 14. Guess what? We're not going to do these questions yet because we haven't covered this part. To me, the last couple of verses of chapter 26 really belong more in chapter 27. So we're going to take the last couple of verses in chapter 26 and we're going to put that in chapter 27 and study it. So let's go ahead and do that. We're up to study number 144. This is chapter 26 through 34, all the way through chapter 27, verse 29. Okay? Now, let's talk about the plot of this chapter. We've been talking about family conflict. We saw it in chapter 25. Jacob got what? The birthright from his brother. The family conflict now becomes full-blown because Esau will end up wanting to kill his brother. Those of you who have a sibling, now I grew up kind of like an only child, because my siblings were so much older. But those of you who have a sibling close to you in age, you probably have had occasions when you've been mad at them. I remember my son, he had received as a gift from my sister, he had received an Arkansas Razorback jersey. Those things are not cheap. What does our daughter do? She decides to do a little alteration on it because she wanted it to look different. I had never seen my son so mad when that happened, okay? We can get mad at our siblings, but you never wanted to kill them. But Esau really wants to kill Jacob. It becomes full-blown, and it's in pursuit of what's called the blessing, the patriarch's blessing, the blessing from Isaac. The future of the promises may be squandered by a family wrecked by jealousy, deception, and power struggles. The tension begins with Isaac's plan to bless Esau. And in just a moment, we're going to see why that really was not a good plan. And then it mounts with Rebekah's deceptive scheme to trick her own husband. Now remember, Rebekah had received a vision from God. God had told her, okay, the younger will serve the older. The younger is going to be the receiver, and the older will be the servant. She had received that even before the boys were born. And I put in parentheses, and maybe Isaac knew it. I can't say. We don't know. Did Rebekah keep that as a secret? Knowing husbands and wives, I'm going to guess, this is just a guess, I'm going to guess that Rebekah probably shared it with Isaac. Can I prove that? No way. I can't prove it. Can't really prove that. But they know, at least Rebekah knows of God's predictions. This is going to get so bad that Rebekah is going to have to plot the flight of Jacob to escape Esau's hand. Now here's a big question, and don't let this question trip you up. Did Rebekah and Jacob have to do what they did? Did Rebekah and Jacob have to, did Rebekah and Jacob have to do what they did? Did they have to scheme to get the blessing? Was this critical that they do this? No. God's will was going to play out some way, somehow. I don't know how, but God's will would play out. Eventually, Jacob would have been the leader of the family. How that would happen, I don't know. But I believe that Jacob would have been eventually the leader anyway. But in so doing, this is going to create a learning experience for Jacob. Because remember his name, Jacob? You know, his name means heel catcher or heel grabber, but it came to mean what? Deceiver. And he will end up living for approximately 20 years with a man that's even a bigger deceiver than he was, Laban. And he's going to learn some lessons that he will need. In the same way that Moses needed the 40 years of being a shepherd, Jacob will need the 20 years of having to put up with Laban's schemes and all the things that Laban did. So, did they really have to do what they did? No. But God can use any situation to accomplish His purpose. So what? Practical applications for living today. You just heard it. God's purpose will always play out. God's plans, God's purpose will always play out. God is always in control. There is a school of thought. There's a school of thought that God made the world, and like you take a alarm clock, and He wound it up, put the alarm clock on the shelf, and just walked away. In other words, there is a school of thought that says that God created the world, and then He created His plan, and then just walked away from it. Not to do anything else with it ever again until the day of judgment. God is involved. God is with us. God is with us even today. The Lord goes with us always. We are not abandoned orphans. We are adopted children. You see the difference? Abandoned orphans versus adopted children. Our adoption is made possible through our obedience to His Word. Now, here comes the irony. Just like Cain, Esau will plot to kill his brother. This is like the story told again. This is like a repeat. Jacob, the deceiver, has to flee, and he ends up being deceived even more by Laban. Isn't that ironic? Later, Jacob will be deceived by 10 of his sons in regards to the supposed death of Joseph. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. As for Isaac and Rebekah, Rebekah will die without a memorial by Moses in the writing. Go with me to Genesis 35. Genesis 35, verse 8. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel under the terebinth tree. Rebekah's nurse gets a whole verse in the Bible. Where's Rebekah at? Rebecca is listed in a laundry list at the very end of the book. In fact, let's go ahead and turn to that. Genesis 49, verse 31. There, speaking of the cave of Machpelah, there they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah, his wife. And there I buried Leah. That's it. She gets in the laundry list. A nurse gets a whole verse about her death. You see, Rebecca started out so good. Remember, when she was presented by Abraham's servant with the option, do you want to go back with me? You'll come back and marry my master's son? Yes, I'll go. She arrives. She sees Isaac. She covers herself in modesty. Boy, that's a good woman. A good woman there. She brings forth 2 sons, twins. Then after that, it's kind of a downhill spiral. She's going to be caught up in deception. And yes, she thinks that she's doing it because, I've got to help God out. I've got to help God out. God said this, God said this is going to happen, so I've got to help God out. Does God need our help? Not really. Not really. How about Isaac? Isaac lives on, but lives on without significance. Look at verse 28 of chapter 35. Verse 28 of chapter 35. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. Chapter 27, Isaac's 100 years old. How was his last 80 years of life? Was his last 80 years of life full of hope and promise and laughter and good times and, just opportunities? At the age of 100, he's almost blind. Remember when Jacob comes into his tent, he has to ask his father to sit up. When Esau comes into his tent, he has to ask his father to sit up. He is basically a bedridden person. His last 80 years, I'm guessing here, this is a guess, but I'm going to say his last 80 years were not great years. And Isaac gets the least number of verses of the major patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Isaac gets the least number of verses in Genesis. Moses does not paint a real flattering picture of either Isaac and Rebekah late in life. So what? Practical applications for living today. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. A friend of mine who's a Christian, his start was not a good start. He was a druggie. He even supplemented his income by selling drugs. Not a good start at all. Today, he is a wonderful Christian helping other people who battle drug addiction to overcome their drug addiction. He donates probably 10 to 15 hours a week to help people to overcome their drug addiction. He's lining up for a great finish. A great finish. I am not athletic. Can you believe that? I'm not athletic. The only sport I really was decent at was track. I did win a lot of trophies in track. But here's my problem. I was a slow starter. The coach would always ask me to run the quarter mile. I never, ever finished higher than last in the quarter mile because it would take me half of the race to get up to speed because I was such a slow starter. I won most of my half-mile races. I won, I think, all of my mile races I can remember. And the few track meets that had a 2-mile race, a few of them did, I would win those. Because it didn't matter how slow I started, it was how I finished. We got to help each other finish well. That's one of the reasons we have the church. That's one of the reasons why God created the church, so that we can finish well. We need each other to encourage each other. Now, notes from inside my Bible. We're looking at verses 34 and 35. When Esau was 40 years old, well, what's important here? That's the same age when Isaac was when he ends up marrying Rebekah. When Isaac was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith, the daughter of Uriah, the Hittite. Hittites. One of the things we have found out by the Hittite nation, and for a while there, we didn't think the Hittite, scientists didn't think the Hittite nation existed. And then just over 100 years ago, about 160 years ago, we discovered a lot of remains associated with the Hittite nation. One of the things they were involved in was infant sacrifices. He marries a woman that comes from that background. He took his wives, Judith and Basemath, don't you love that name? The daughter of Elon the Hittite. He marries 2 Hittite women. And these women, were a grief of mine to Isaac and Rebekah. Now, let's tear this 2 verses down. Because to me, these 2 verses really set up what happens in 27. Because in chapter 27, I want to say, okay, Isaac, okay, Rebekah, you got a son that is married to Hittite women. It's causing you major grief. So, Isaac, why do you want to give Esau the blessing? Why? But first, let's look at verse 34. When Esau, the report of Esau's marriage to Hittite women frames another dark picture of the character of Esau. He is not like his grandfather. He is not like his grandfather at all. Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person like who? Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know the afterward, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. Esau will become the father of the Edomites. Edom. They will be a thorn in the flesh to all of Israel. Herod the Great will come from the Edomites, continuing that history of the Edomites being a thorn in the flesh to the Israelites. 40 years. Abraham provided a wife for Isaac when Isaac was 40. After Jacob steals the blessing, and this is a theft through deception. After Jacob steals the blessing, Isaac and Rebekah makes provisions for Jacob's marriage to a wife from their own lineage, back in the old country, the old home country, not from the Canaanites. In the case of Esau, got a question for you. Is Esau's marriage to Hittite women, is this due to Isaac just not caring? Or is it due to Esau's strong will that he marries Hittite women? Actually, Moses does not reveal the answer. In either case, doesn't matter which answer is true. In either case, Esau has broken with the accepted practice by contracting his own marriage. And notice, it's two women. What has been the history when mankind has had two wives? We've had problems. Took as wives. Profane Esau shows his disregard for Abraham's God-given vision to sanctify the earth through his offspring. Esau is without excuse for marrying Hittites who are listed. If you read on the writings of Moses, Hittites are listed among who? The wicked Canaanites. Some of the worst. Judah, Basemath. The names are going to be changed in Genesis 36, verses 1 and 2. I'm not going to give you the reason now. I'm going to give you the reason for the change when we get to Genesis 36. But their names are changed for a reason. So you can kind of think about it, study it, try to figure out yourself. So what? Practical applications for living today. Who you marry will impact you spiritually. Who you marry will impact you spiritually. Go back several months, I did a lesson. It was based on the 10 things that impact a person's faith as we grow up. Because every one of us want our children to be faithful. I mean, if I was to ask you, do you want your children to be faithful? You're going to say, yes, I want my children to be faithful. Remember that lesson? Go back to that lesson. I'm going to pull out what I call my top 7 of the 10 things that we talked about that day. My top 7 of the 10 things. Number 1, the spiritual foundation that you give them as parents will impact them on how they stay faithful or not faithful. Keep in mind, your children know the real you. I don't know the real you. You don't know the real me. But my children know the real me. Are you modeling Christianity? This weekend, my youngest grandson had to correct me. We were busy trying to get things done. You know, sometimes you're trying to get on a schedule and trying to, sometimes, children are kind of hard to kind of get all organized in the morning, get them up, get them dressed, get them fed, got to take off. And I had got Samuel's breakfast ready. It was sitting on the plate, and he's just sitting there. And I'm frantic. I'm trying to get everything done, trying to get on schedule. We got to leave. What's he waiting for? You know the answer. The prayer. He had to school me a little bit. Hey, we need to slow down. We need to have a prayer. Number 2, who they marry. Who they marry can have a tremendous impact on their faithfulness or lack of faithfulness. Guess what? You as a parent have some control over that. Because you have a right as a parent to say, okay, you can date this person, or no, I really don't want you to date that person. Now, you can't control love, I understand that. But you can have some degree of control over who they date. Our daughter wanted to date someone that, I didn't want her to date. I thought that was bad. This was back when she was like 16 or 17, and we squashed that idea. She is so thankful that we squashed that idea. Because who you date will be who you marry. In our society, you do not marry someone without first dating them. That's part of our society. So you do have some degree of control there. Make sure they're dating good people. Now, how do you do that? Do you pray for the future husband, the future wife of your children? Do you pray for the parents of the future husband or the future wife of your children and grandchildren? You should. Number 3 on my list was their circle of friends. Their circle of friends will have an impact on them as they're growing up. Now, once again, you have a degree of control here. We made it very easy for our children to have good friends around them. We made it very easy for our children to have good friends around them. We wanted our house to be Grand Central Station. Now, if your house is Grand Central Station, you're going to have a lot of snacks. You're going to have a lot of Kool-Aid and soft drinks, and you're going to have a lot of mess in your house. Messy floors from dirty feet, so on, so on, so on. That's okay. In fact, you should celebrate that. Number 4, their academic world, where they go to school, where they go to college. Once again, you can have some degree here of control. I told my kids, here's a list of schools that I will help you go and attend. Financially, I'll help you go to attend. Anything not on this list, guess what? You're going to pay for the whole thing. Guess what? They picked schools on my list. Can you believe that? Number 5, where they choose to live as an adult. This is one you probably don't have a lot of control over. But where they choose to live as an adult. Is the church strong where they're going to live? You need to help them pick a good major. Sit down with them, talk to them about that major, because that's going to have a big impact on where they end up living, because where the jobs are associated with that major, okay? We just this weekend had the opportunity to talk with a couple. They had moved to Arkansas. They moved to Arkansas from California, and they were glad to move from California, glad to get out of that heathen world of California. Where will your children choose to live as an adult? Number 6, their work environment. Once again, you have just a tiny bit of control. That would be talking to them about their major and knowing something about the job opportunities in that major. And then number 7, the local church where they live. The local church where they live. How strong is that church? What can you do to help that church be stronger? Those were 7 of the 10 things that we shared. This was months ago, last year. Of the 10 things that will affect your child's faithfulness. Because downright, hey, what's the most important thing to you as a parent, as a grandparent? Is to get your children, grandchildren to heaven, right? That's the most important thing that you can even think about. It's more important than the next car you own. It's more important than the house you live in. It's more important than the clothes you wear. It's getting your children to heaven. And that goes back, let's go back to number 2 again. Let's go back to what I have said time and time again. What's a reason to get married? Well, I love her. I love him. Thank you so much. We've got 5 minutes. Please send in your text questions, and we'll get to those in just a minute. I love her. I love him. He's fun to be with. She's fun to be with. We're compatible. Well, all those are good things. But the most important thing about marrying someone is you have found someone that will help you on the road to heaven. If that person will not help you on the road to heaven, why marry that person? We just recently were talking about someone who I encouraged her not to marry this person because I said, this person will not help you on the road to heaven. This person will be a downpull. This person will hurt you. Did she listen? No. They're in the process of separation and probably will end up in divorce very soon. That's sad. That's sad. Now, let's look at any questions that you've sent in. Looks like we got one. Okay, yeah. What is the difference in the birthright and the blessing that Isaac would have given? Love that question. I'm going to hold off until next class because I want to talk about that when we actually get into the giving of the blessing. So I'm going to hold off on the answer to that one because there is a slight difference between the birthright and the blessing, and we'll talk about the differences there. Let me give you good news. You all sound correct. You all sound normal. I am ahead of the curve now. Everybody sounds normal. Now, am I handling crowd noise well? No way. Crowd noise still throws me. So you're going to see me during singing. You're going to see me go into my app, and I'm going to mute this and turn it off because I can't handle it. But individually, you sound normal. Tom, you sound like Tom. You don't sound like Mickey Mouse anymore. So everyone sounds normal. So that is great. I'm ahead of the curve. My doctor has said, give it time. You'll understand how. Right now, if I'm in a crowd of 100 people, one person's talking to me, I hear 100 people. I can't focus on the one yet. So that's going to come, I'm sure. But in the meantime, in a crowd, I just mute it, and eventually I will learn. You are dismissed. We're about a minute early, so don't disturb the children's classes, but you are dismissed. Thank you.